My name is George Miller, and I'm currently a senior at Canadian Academy in Japan.
It's kind of hard to overstate just how bizarre it is that one of the biggest pop stars in the world today started out on YouTube, eating hair, wearing a pink morph suit, and making some of the most unhinged, genuinely insane comedy sketches the internet has ever seen. But that's the reality we live in. Joji, Filthy Frank, Pink Guy, whatever name you knew him by first, didn't just reinvent himself. He escaped an entire internet persona, an entire era of online culture, and somehow managed to build something new and serious in its wake. I think a lot of people, especially newer fans, don't realize just how crazy that is. Most YouTubers who try to pivot, they fall off. Their old fans turn on them, the new audience doesn't care, or they get boxed in by whatever they used to be. But George, he managed to break out of the box, light it on fire, and walk away from the ashes. Somehow millions of people went from quoting, "It's time to stop" and "Welcome to the rice fields, motherfucker" in middle school, to genuinely crying in their cars or bedrooms to songs like "Glimpse of Us" and "Slow Dancing in the Dark" years later. There's really nobody else doing it like Joji. So this is more than just a story about a guy who changed his name and changed his sound. This is a story about what happens when you outgrow the thing that made you famous. It's about the pain of leaving something behind, the pressure of millions of eyes watching you stumble, and the rare kind of discipline that it takes to say, "I'm done," even when you have millions of eyes on you. It's about the risk of starting over from zero, and then actually pulling it off. So whether you're a day one fan from the Disaster Music days, or you found his music on Spotify and had no idea he ever yelled about weeaboos on YouTube, this video is for you. We're gonna unpack how George Miller became a pop star, why he walked away from being the king of internet comedy, and what it says about growing up in front of the whole world. I'm Kusari, and this is the Joji story. Anyways, let's get into the video. If you look at where George Miller ended up, it's easy to forget that he was never really supposed to become a pop star or even a famous comedian. His whole story started in a place that most people probably never picture when they think about internet culture: rice fields in Osaka. George Kusunoki Miller, known as Joji to everyone back home, grew up surrounded by the kind of quiet and nature that makes you think more than you talk. In interviews, he's described childhood afternoons as just hanging out with friends by the water, chasing frogs, and soaking in the peace. It's a pretty weird visual if you only know him for screaming into the camera, but it makes sense when you realize that that's where his creative spark actually came from.
Yeah, it was really weird actually. I was growing up with, I had two friends that we always made music together. And we were making songs before we knew we were making songs. Like we'd be silly and we'd make songs about like, you know, a teacher, or like if we were like making fun of a kid, we'd make a song about a kid, which, you know, never do that. But, you know, we were doing that kind of stuff. And then one day, I think we were in like 6th grade or something, someone steps in and is just like, wait, these are actual songs. And we're like, what? Like, what do you mean? They're like, yeah, like, you know, like it's not easy to make a song. So from there, we were like, oh, we're making songs. That's cool. And we just kept kind of making songs. And through that, like just through fucking around, we learned how to produce, how to, you know, just train our voices, and just kind of learn from the internet what was popping all throughout then. Because that was when the internet was starting to kick off, and we were learning and doing all kinds of stuff.
For George, this was a revelation. The realization that not everyone could spontaneously craft a song, even a joke one, sparked something deeper within him. He began to understand that he had a genuine talent, and more importantly, he started to believe that with enough curiosity and experimentation, he could create something new every single day if he wanted to. But talent without a platform is just potential energy waiting to be released. Fortunately, a new website called YouTube was just beginning to emerge, offering something unprecedented. A place where anyone could upload anything and see what the world thought about it. For a restless creative mind like George's, this was exactly the outlet that he had been waiting for. The day was June 6th, 2006. That would be the day that marked George Miller's first tentative step into video making and the internet. The channel was called Cosmochino, and the very first video on it was titled, oh my god, Retard Ray. It's just two kids play fighting somewhere public, the kind of things that look like nothing now. You can barely tell who's who, and the camera quality is trash, and the lighting's worse, but weirdly enough, that's part of the video's charm. There's no branding, no hey guys like and subscribe, nothing polished at all, just some bored kids trying to capture a bit of whatever weirdness was going on in their heads. But George's restless nature meant that he never stayed in one creative space for very long. Cosmochino was quickly abandoned as he moved on to explore different facets of his personality, testing which version of himself might resonate with this brand new audience of his. On September 24th of that same year, just days after his birthday, he started another channel, Too Cool For You 92. The first upload on it was a breakdancing video in some school hallway.
What? Break dance. Go, 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 go. Oh yeah. Wait.
Not gonna lie, George was kind of hitting that shit. Like, alright, I see you, bro. This seemingly throwaway clip would eventually rack up millions of views years later, becoming a piece of internet archaeology that fans would treasure as the oldest surviving footage of George online. But at the time, it was just another experiment that he would soon grow tired of and abandon. So that channel would fade away too, and by the next year, he had moved on yet again. On June 22nd, 2007, Haha Glolmu was born. I don't know if I butchered that pronunciation or not, but we're just gonna roll with it. If you're the type of person who goes looking for deep cuts, you'll find this channel is sort of a graveyard filled with half-finished projects and creative dead ends. The first two videos don't even play. They're still stuck forever on processing for some weird reason. And among this scatter of uploads, you'll find an animated recreation of a scene from Antigone and a play summary titled Far Away. Even this channel reveals bits and pieces about Joji. It shows that he was someone whose interests as a teenager were scattered across an impossibly wide spectrum.
In the play, Far Away, written by Carol Churchill, there are prisoners mentioned in some scenes. In the first scene of the play, the main character Joan and her aunt Harper are talking about the actions of Joan's uncle. Soon, Joan finds out that the man is actually smuggling people and helping them escape. This gives the reader a clear idea that they must be some sort of prisoners, because in the second scene, Joan and a man named Todd are making extravagant hats for prisoners to march in before they get executed. Now the question is, what do these prisoners represent?
Music, though, was a very consistent part of this story. It just kept pulling George back. It was the one thing that he never ever seemed to abandon, even as he bounced from channel to channel. Still, it took until mid-2008 for George to finally give himself a real platform for whatever he wanted to do. So that was when he started what would become his most important early channel, Disaster Music. This time, you could tell there was something different about it. The very first upload, a video titled Little John Falls Off a Table, is exactly what it sounds like. Someone, probably George, in a party mask and a dreadlock hat, whipping around and then bailing off a table. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty funny. This confidence led to an experimental phase where George would start doing sketch comedy. George and his friends would start filming skits and inventing recurring characters, like the Tempura Boys. If you go back and watch these, you'll probably cringe a little, but there's something really genuine about them. Only one full episode of this series ever made it out, plus a teaser and a few bloopers, but it's obvious that they were just making shit because it was fun and not because they were chasing views. Hell, there was even an attempt to revive Retard Ray as a proper series, carrying over that same scrappy energy from his first ever video. Most of these videos have unfortunately disappeared, and some are just considered lost media at this point. Only one episode is online now, and it didn't even come from George. It's a fan re-upload. Some people think he wiped the old episodes on purpose because his main channel took off, and he more than likely wanted to keep his friends from suddenly being recognized or hassled by random strangers. But we'll never know for sure. And of course, less than 2 weeks after starting Disaster Music, he made another channel, Aussie Asian Boys, a short-lived side project with just a few uploads. The videos are all music parodies of various popular artists and rappers at the time, and the channel only lasted about a week and a half before he ultimately lost interest and abandoned it. However, the videos are all still up to this day. He didn't really stop there either, though. February of 2009 would bring another channel, Japan Walkers. This one has just a single upload. George, in jeans and white sneakers, dancing in the streets to a The Game song. Again, it's short, casual, low effort, but that's kind of the point. George would launch these random creative experiments, let them breathe for a bit, and then move on when they stopped being interesting. There are even more lost projects out there, but honestly, at this point, it starts to feel redundant. The real story is about how George kept on pushing, and how he was always willing to try something new, and was never afraid to leave old work behind if it didn't fit anymore. Disaster Music, though, became his base of operations. That's where he started posting the sketch videos that would eventually become his bread and butter. It was a different time on YouTube. Nobody was getting big money for videos, there were no teams or fancy setups. If you look at Disaster Music's uploads from back then, it's all pure experiment. The humor was offbeat, self-aware, and never tried to look expensive. YouTube wasn't really corporate yet. It was just people with cameras making shit up as they went. Somewhere around mid-2009, though, the upload streak slowed down. The sketches faded, and George seemed to drift away from YouTube for a bit, but he never fully disappeared. When he came back, he started to actually use Disaster Music to push his music, not just the comedy. Most people have never heard it, but the earliest song that George would ever put out online is something called The Greatest Song Ever. Actually, I take that back because it wasn't even supposed to be made public. Apparently, some Filthy Frank fan channel would end up leaking it years later. Turns out it was recorded on October 25th, 2009, and if you listen, you can hear just how much he was still figuring everything out, experimenting with sounds and vocals.
Any guy that annoys me, I shoot him in the face, shoot him in another place. His nuts! I don't care what they say, I'm a genius. If you don't agree, then I'll punch you in the penis.
These early years are kind of weird to look back on now, knowing how massive that George would eventually get. You can see all the different threads of his personality starting to form here. The music was always there, the sketch comedy was bubbling up, and there was a restlessness to everything that he was uploading. He would start a new project, run with it until it got stale, and then move on and never look back. It's almost like he knew from the beginning that he would have to reinvent himself a fuck ton of times if he ever wanted to actually make something lasting. And sure, nobody watching those early videos could have predicted what was coming next. But looking back, you can kind of see the timeline of George's slow development and progression as a creator. His jokes started to become edgier, his characters started to become weirder and more unique, and George himself started figuring out how to push people's buttons in a way that nobody else on YouTube was doing at the time. These early days are where he learned the fundamentals on how to keep people watching, how to build a persona online, and how to make something that sticks in your memory. So it wouldn't be until 2011 when a brand new character would enter the picture, and everything would really, truly take off.
Hey guys, I'm back again. Did you miss me, you filthy little pieces of pigeon shit? Hey guys, it's Filthy Frank! What's up, you flaming bag of Indian horse shit?
August 5th, 2011 might have seemed like a totally ordinary day at the time. YouTube was still young, creators were experimenting, and nobody was exactly sure what was going to stick. But when George uploaded a video titled Filthy Shit, something shifted. At the time, it probably just seemed like another throwaway video. But looking back, this was the moment that would mark the birth of George's first fully realized character, Filthy Frank. Filthy Shit is as crude as you'd expect from the title, but that's exactly what set it apart. It features George telling an absurd story about explosive diarrhea, toilet paper shortages, and a disastrous bathroom scenario.
I'd like to share with you a little story. I tend to have explosive diarrhea, like shit just flies all over the place. So I sat down to take a shit. Of course, diarrhea just exploded all over the place. I mean, it was shit basically. I noticed there was no toilet paper left. So I got up and I decided to go get some of the toilet paper. When I got back to the toilet, I realized that I was dripping shit. I was dripping shit from my ass. There was shit all over my floor, and I thought to myself, "Oh shit, what am I gonna do?" Because it's shit, it's shit all over my floor. I tried wiping the shit, but the shit just kept piling onto each other. There was just shit all over the place. And it was like shit on the walls and shit on the floor, shit in the carpet, shit in the fan, and there was just filthy shit flying all over the place. It was disgusting. It was shit.
If the description of the video wasn't enough indication of its absurdity, nothing else would be. George wrote, "I made a bet with a friend where if I can get this video to over 10,000 views, I can punch him in the nuts as hard as I can. So help us out. I explore the wonders of explosive diarrhea and tell a story about my encounters. Once again, I apologize. There have been technical problems and whatnot. Sex! I'm a big This video immediately grabbed attention. Not necessarily because it was high quality, polished, or insightful, but because it was completely unhinged in a way that very few creators dared to be. It was as if George had suddenly realized that he could say whatever the fuck he wanted as long as it was funny. And that unfiltered freedom was exactly what made Filthy Frank special. It soon became officially recognized as the first proper episode of what would later become known as the Filthy Frank Show. Recognizing that Filthy Shit got far more attention than his previous uploads, George quickly followed it with more content featuring Frank. One notable video was him simply reading hate comments. It was obviously low effort by today's standards, but people loved seeing George, as Frank, roast commenters who tried and failed to get under his skin.
We have our first hater. I'm actually pretty excited. It's the first time I get to shove my fist up someone's ass so far that they can taste shit. No girl wants to kiss me? I get more pussy than you ever will. I'm black. So let me tell you a little something, kid. Back in Thailand, they call me Mr. Priest. Because I'm gonna touch the shit out of you. I will find your family, I will find your dog, and I will look him in the eye and increase the sexual tension between the two of us. Yeah, your dog's gonna like that. Anyways, if any of you have a hater comment, don't be afraid to leave it down there. I'd love to see it. Seriously. Now, if you want to see me more than 2 times a week, you can follow me on Twitter. It's in the dick section below. I hope you had a terrible day and you can suck my dick.
This formula clicked instantly, and George began shifting more of his energy towards producing this raw, offensive comedy, with each video seemingly pushing the boundaries even further. Interestingly, the channel's description at the time openly admitted that the comedy on display was intentionally limiting. It hinted that George was aware that he had more to offer beyond just shock humor, but was comfortable for now to indulge in this absurd little world of his. Around this same time, on August 8th, George casually dropped a seemingly innocuous post on his Tumblr. It featured him grinning widely in a bright pink jumpsuit that he had recently bought, captioned casually, "I bought this last night. This is a total game changer. Internet fame, here I come." Nobody, including George himself, could have anticipated just how prophetic that casual joke would become. And by early 2012, George would officially introduce the world to that pink-suited character in the video Me Singing Adele. Here, in a deliberately painful rendition of Adele's Someone Like You, he forgets the lyrics midway and devolves into shouting random words like piss and dicks.
I
you settled down and you found the man in you. Damn it! Piss! I heard that you need to piss! Dicks!
Originally introduced as Mr. Pink, this bizarre figure would soon better be known as Pink Guy, a character who quickly became equally beloved and notorious for his antics in public. And George did not stop at Pink Guy, obviously. As he kept creating videos, he introduced even more bizarre characters. The humor was uncomfortable, edgy, and somehow irresistibly funny. And all of this continued as George decided to move to America in mid-2012, enrolling in the New York Institute of Technology in Brooklyn at the age of 18. But even this major life change did not slow his creative momentum. So he continued adding new characters into the expanding Filthy Frank universe. Each character somehow more bizarre and nonsensical than the last. This growing cast of characters allowed George to create increasingly complex jokes and references, building a web of lore that rewarded longtime viewers and helped grow a cult-like fanbase. A classic video from this period is the infamous video How to Say Hello in 30 Languages, which introduced what would become one of his most iconic lines.
Welcome to the rice fields, motherfucker!
This phrase took on a life of its own, spawning countless memes and outlasting the original video, which eventually got removed by YouTube for violating content policies. Even as he was still relatively fresh to the scene, George had a unique knack for producing viral moments. The best proof of this was his role in launching one of the most massive internet trends ever, the Harlem Shake. On February 2nd, 2013, George uploaded a seemingly random, silly video titled, Do the Harlem Shake. It blew up astonishingly fast, and soon enough, countless videos were flooding YouTube, featuring the same 30-second format that George had popularized. This meme became a global phenomenon overnight. Although he didn't originate the dance itself, which dates back decades, George unquestionably launched the modern internet version that took over the world as we know it. George started yet another channel on January 22nd, 2013, called TV Filthy Frank. Initially, this served as a backup to Disaster Music, featuring random skits and short clips. At the time, TV Filthy Frank didn't seem particularly important, just an extra space for George to experiment. 2013 also marked a notable shift in George's creative approach. On April 7th, he uploaded a video introducing Chin Chin, a menacing, bizarre character who became the central villain in Filthy Frank's strange lore. With Chin Chin's arrival, the show began leaning heavily into this idea of interconnected storytelling and lore, introducing continuity between otherwise random-seeming videos. Fans were hooked not just by the absurd humor, but by the intricate storytelling that was gradually developing across the series. But behind this rapid growth and success, George had began to struggle. In May of 2014, he uploaded a deeply personal and unusual video titled Filthy Frank Exposes Himself. Stripping away his persona, costumes, and jokes, George spoke directly to his audience. He revealed that he had a neurological condition that caused stress-induced seizures, exacerbated by the pressures of running the show. He reminded his viewers that behind Frank, Pink Guy, Chin Chin, and all of the other characters was a regular, vulnerable person.
So I'm gonna be straight up with you guys. I have not been well the last couple months. Long story short, I was born with this, but I was recently diagnosed with a brain condition that ironically gives me seizures This whole time we thought it was so funny doing these fake seizures, and now some call it bad luck, some call it karma, but ironically, boss.
Hey boss, I have a seizure.
Now, it's not extremely life-threatening or anything, and I'm not gonna go into detail because obviously I don't want you guys looking shit up. But unfortunately, what happens here is a lot of the seizures are actually induced by stress, which unfortunately a lot of it comes from running this show.
George didn't shy away from challenging his audience either, telling them plainly that if they weren't okay with seeing the real him, he didn't want their support. This video also included announcements about new music projects, specifically mentioning a Pink Guy album and a new musical direction under the name Joji. It hinted at George's deeper artistic ambitions, something he'd only lightly teased before. On the same day, George also started another channel. This time it was called Joji Vlogs, designed to showcase his everyday life as a college student in Brooklyn. Initially comedic, George quickly pivoted to a more serious and genuine approach. This was because he got worried that his humor was starting to overshadow the authenticity of his vlogs. So he traveled back to Japan and started reconnecting with old friends, documenting his life candidly, although increasingly feeling insecure about the project. Eventually, he would abandon Joji Vlogs entirely, deleting all content on the channel by the end of the year. Many speculate that he regretted exposing so much of his personal life to fans who mostly just cared about the wild antics of Frank and Pink Guy. And of course, throughout this period, he never stopped making music, even as his characters. On May 23rd, 2014, George would end up releasing that first full-length Pink Guy album, simply titled Pink Guy. The album was a big hit among his fanbase, who praised its fearless disregard for political correctness. Hell, even Anthony Fantano of The Needle Drop reviewed the album, humorously noting the cheap beats and crude lyrics, yet admitting that the content wasn't quite as shocking or offensive as he'd anticipated.
While it's not a really bad LP overall, and Pink Eye definitely has a style that when you hear it, you're gonna know it's his definitive style. What I was ultimately disappointed by was just how little I hated myself after listening to this record. I didn't even feel like I needed to take a shower. I'm just worried that people are going to listen to this LP and not question whether or not they want to live on this world anymore because of just how horrifically gross it is. And it just didn't happen. After this album was over, I just felt completely normal.
Alongside the release of the Pink Guy mixtape, George announced that he was working on a serious album. This project would end up being scrapped, mostly because his focus shifted more towards Filthy Frank at the time. But in late 2015, two songs would quietly appear on SoundCloud, Tom and You Suck Charlie. This would mark the first time that any music had been released under the name Joji, whether officially or unofficially. Over time, more tracks from this era would end up surfacing, and eventually the full album would end up leaking online. The project, known unofficially as Chloe Burbank, had a way more indie, stripped-down sound than anything that he would go on to release later. With his channels growing rapidly, George knew that changes were necessary to sustain his work. He eventually decided to transition fully to the TV Filthy Frank channel, announcing this shift in an August 2014 video titled New Channel TV Filthy Frank. In character as Frank, he explained that Disaster Music had become too risky to keep uploading on regularly due to potential YouTube strikes.
Now, if you look back on this whole channel, you'll notice that it's been a real cesspool of classic gutter humor. Years and years and years of filth have been put into this channel, and it's beautiful. And thanks to all you pieces of shit, look how far it's come. We've had this channel since middle school. That was a long time ago, and it means a lot to me. This channel, it really does. But it's time to move on. Just to a different channel. But this is why. You see, this channel's been around for so long, and it's under no kind of protection. So over the years, naturally, a channel like this has taken many, many hits. A lot of community strikes, mostly about the content, a lot of copyright. But anyways, this channel's received so many blows that it can barely stand on its own feet anymore. It's just so diseased and weak. It makes me sad.
A final short video titled Kill Me Ha 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 humorously encouraged his followers to migrate over to TV Filthy Frank. In just 3 short years, George had completely reshaped his creative identity online, going from a random nobody YouTube comedian into a phenomenon who was dominating internet culture. Filthy Frank had become an entire universe, drawing in millions of viewers who couldn't look away. But hidden beneath all this success was the underlying truth that George Miller was much more complex than the insane world that he had been creating.
Just before George Miller decided to officially retire the Disaster Music channel, he quietly set up another side channel called Too Damn Filthy in July of 2014. This channel essentially served the same purpose as his main backup, TV Filthy Frank, acting as an emergency channel of sorts just in case YouTube ever cracked down on his content. George seemed to understand how volatile his style of comedy was starting to get on a platform that was slowly starting to become more and more sensitive to controversial humor. Around this time, George leaned deeper into original concepts for videos, each developing its own distinct tone. One of these was the Japanese 101 series. This series featured Filthy Frank as a sort of degenerate language instructor who would enthusiastically teach his viewers obscene Japanese phrases with hilariously deadpan delivery.
You know, the wonderful thing about education is the relationship between the student and the teacher. You know, I like to think of myself as a pretty chill teacher. Like, I got one of these apples. You know, all the students love me here.
Another concept of his, Loser Reads Hate Comments, was straightforward yet very effective. Frank would read out the angriest and dumbest comments from his audience and proceed to roast them with an unapologetic and dismissive attitude. Instead of defensively addressing the criticism, George would flip it entirely and ridicule commenters for taking things seriously in the first place. Each episode essentially doubled as a showcase for his sharp comedic timing. George would also introduce another series. This time it was called Cringe of the Week, dedicating each installment to mocking specific online trends or behaviors that annoyed him.
There's certain things that you read online that you would never hope to hear in real life. And you know, I know a lot of you have seen this video, but I kind of want to go over it because it makes me cringe.
At this point, nothing was off limits for George. Some of his most memorable standalone videos came from this period too. Among these was the fan favorite and timeless classic, Weeaboos, uploaded in September of 2014. Here, Frank would deliver a legendary rant explaining the behavior of obsessive anime fans, commonly known as weeaboos, who idolize and misunderstand Japanese culture to a comically unhealthy degree. Frank methodically dismantled each trope associated with weeaboos in this video. Tropes like useless online language courses, anime body pillows, samurai sword collections, and the unshakable belief that these people somehow understand Japan better than the actual Japanese population. This video's centerpiece was a ukulele ballad written and performed by George himself, in which he comically narrates the life of an aging weeaboo living in his mother's basement, genuinely convinced he's destined for something greater. As expected, this song alone became a fan favorite. Perhaps one of the most beloved and influential uploads from this era was Bad Internet Rappers, released on November 14th, 2014. The video took viewers on a satirical tour through the phases of becoming a SoundCloud rapper, from inflated confidence and cringe bars to desperate acts of self-promotion. This video also introduced a brand new character named Politics, played by George himself and parodying, you guessed it, SoundCloud rappers. Politics embodied every ridiculous stereotype of the genre, claiming to be a quote-unquote spiritual, miracle, lyrical individual. Politics appeared as a minor villain who was hilariously killed off within the same video, but he later returned in tracks like Hand on My Gat, mostly due to his popularity among the fanbase. Astonishingly, all of these now iconic series and standout videos weren't slowly developed over several years. George was on a creative spree in 2014, consistently releasing content that rapidly attracted millions of views per upload. By the end of that year, his subscriber count surged into the hundreds of thousands, quickly approaching the 1 million mark, which was a huge achievement at the time for anyone, period. But despite all of this incredible momentum, George was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the blurring of the lines between his internet characters and his real life. Earlier in the year, he had already briefly introduced his true identity into the Filthy Frank show as Joji. He even created a channel called Joji Vlogs to showcase his everyday life in Brooklyn and Japan. However, By late 2014, George had started pulling back rapidly from sharing his personal details online. All of the vlogs and Joji appearances disappeared, possibly suggesting that perhaps he was feeling a bit uneasy with how invested his fans were starting to become in his personal life. George's discomfort came to a head in a now infamous incident involving the Filthy Frank wiki. Fans had created a detailed page documenting the Joji persona, which George found distressing to say the least. He directly confronted the wiki administrators, initially politely asking them to remove anything related to his personal life.
Hey guys, Joji here. I asked the admin a few months ago to take anything unrelated to the characters down. I'd appreciate it if you guys took this down. Thank you so much. Please take anything related to my personal life down. Thank you.
But when they stubbornly refused, a public argument erupted on the site's forums.
Since Joji basically erased every video with him in it and then declared he was not a part of the Filthy Frank show anymore, should we not include him in the wiki pages? Just because Joji wants to be we should at least keep the page for documentation purposes. Joji has said he isn't related to the Filthy Frank show in any way, so keeping him on the Filthy Frank wiki seems a tad... Of course, I'm not the one making decisions. He could of course still be credited as the creator, but should be referred to as such and not by name. He said something like that on his Twitter, but I'm not 100%. Hey guys, Joji here again. Can you please leave me out of this? Sorry for being
Frustrated, George bluntly asked if they'd appreciate having their own personal lives dissected by strangers on the internet.
Would you like personal information about you put on blast by people you don't know on the internet? If you do, that's fine. I just like my privacy. Thank you.
At one point, George even threatened to have the entire wiki deleted, even claiming he was working on an official Filthy Frank website.
Hi Raniero, it's me again. Sorry to bother you. I noticed there's still an article about me on the page. I'd like everything unrelated to the characters taken down if that's not too much to ask for. Thank you so much. Also, saying that I have Parkinson's disease is slanderous and quite rude in my opinion. I want you guys to enjoy the characters and stuff, but if you guys are going to keep writing bad stuff about my personal life online, then I will ask for this whole site to be taken down. Please leave me, the creator, out of this. Thank you so much. Hi Raniero, in that case, can we just delete this site? Sorry for the bad news. We're working on an actual Filthy Frank website with accurate information regarding the characters. If people complain, you can just put the blame on me and explain that there's an actual website in the works. Sorry, and thank you so much for cooperating.
Fans suspected this was a bluff, however, as no such website ever emerged or was officially announced. But eventually, both sides compromised. The wiki page for Joji would remain online but was stripped of its information, reduced to basically nothing but a satirical image joking that George had been sacrificed to Chin Chin. It was a tense and uncomfortable situation that pretty clearly supports the idea that George had a growing anxiety over his fans' increasing obsession with his private life during this time. And to be honest, it's understandable why George would react defensively, even if his responses to the situation weren't necessarily the greatest. He was navigating unprecedented territory and trying to maintain control over an increasingly invasive audience, and it clearly put a lot of pressure on him. George was constantly balancing his public persona with his own mental and emotional health on top of the stress of managing his creative output. Ultimately, George realized he needed clear boundaries between his personal life and his internet persona. So, while he continued to make outrageous content as Filthy Frank and Pink Guy, the Joji persona quietly retreated. Beneath the jokes, he had achieved unprecedented success, but he was also becoming increasingly aware of the need for change.
Heading into 2015, George continued dropping videos that would capture massive attention online. And rather than frantically upload new material at a relentless pace, he would start releasing content less frequently but with significantly improved quality. This shift allowed him to put more care into each project, resulting in better editing, storytelling, and humor that landed more effectively with his viewers. One of the standout aspects of 2015 was George beginning to collaborate openly with fellow YouTubers, people who matched his edgy and absurdist style of video making. This group notably included creators like Max Mofo and How To Basic. Their first major collaboration happened in June 2015 with the now infamous video titled Vomit Cake, inspired by Jon Favreau's film Chef. In the video, George, Max, and How To Basic attempted to bake a cake using ingredients that they had just puked up beforehand. And true to their shocking style, they then tried eating the cake, only to vomit it all up again. I don't even know how much of the video I can even show on screen right now. It's probably going to be censored. Following Vomit Cake, George's collaborations expanded even further. Max Mofo visited California alongside iDubbbz, whose channel was gradually gaining traction through series like Kickstarter Crap and Bad Unboxing. While iDubbbz was slowly becoming known, his involvement with George and Max catapulted him towards wider recognition.
Oh dear God. You think chef? What's wrong with your city? You think chef?
His first prominent appearance on George's channel came in November 2015 with Hair Cake, where Ian famously shaved off his hair, which then became the primary ingredient for yet another grotesque cake. This video started a running joke within their communities. Ian supposedly had cancer, and the joke played to its fullest when Ian's character dramatically died at the video's climax.
Did you know the US is funding millions of Israelis to kill innocent Palestinians? Innocent Palestinians. I don't like this video anymore. I want to go.
Only a few weeks later, the group welcomed another memorable addition. Chad, better known online as Anything for Views. Chad's debut came in the infamous Dumbass Gets PewDiePie Tattoo video, uploaded in late 2015. The premise was brutally simple. George, Max, and Ian dragged Chad into a tattoo parlor, forcing him to get a tattoo featuring PewDiePie's Brofist logo and the word meme inked onto his backside. The video escalated into public trolling as they then showed off the tattoo to bewildered pedestrians.
What is your favorite PewDiePie episode?
Hi, babes.
Oh, hell yeah. Nice.
Give us your favorite off the top of your head. Don't be shy.
He wants some footage.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Have you seen Chef? By John Favreau?
My name is Chef.
My
name is Chef.
Robbie. We have more victims.
My name is Chef.
This crew, George, Max Mofo, iDubbbz, How2Basic, and Chad, they became affectionately known among fans as the Cancer Crew. Their content embraced this same sort of shock value humor and boundary-pushing antics as the Filthy Frank show. George's integration into this group also saw him appearing in his friends' videos as well. On Max's channel, he appeared painted red, shirtless, and playing a devilish character in a wheelchair in the chaotic Ramen Off video, where he and Max nearly set themselves on fire cooking ramen noodles in a washing machine.
Oh, it's a cauldron now. Shut the fuck up. How much ramen do these kids have?
Wait. Stop.
Is this how you cook ramen? What is this, a white people thing? Reminds me of my cousin.
Early in 2016, George started to regularly collaborate with another rising YouTube couple at the time, Ethan and Hila Klein from H3H3 Productions. At the time, Ethan, Hila, and George lived in the same city in New York, which made collaboration not only very frequent, but also very convenient. Their collaborations together overall did a great job at showcasing their creative chemistry together, and it ultimately resulted in both channels seeing much more growth and success.
Hey cutie, how you doing? You look pretty good. What's your name? I'm Ethan.
I'm Frank.
Nice to see you. You look great. You look great. I wouldn't mind taking you out and show you a good night on the town. Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Really good night. I'm gonna fucking tear that ass up.
Sorry, I have a boyfriend already.
Oh yeah, you've got a boyfriend?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm the Pope. Bitch, you broke as hell. One night.
No, thank you.
Man, alright, I see how it is. I guess you're just not interested in any of my raviolis then, huh?
Well, wait a minute. I didn't know about the ravioli.
Oh, you like that? Chef Boyardee, huh? You like that?
Yeah, I like chef.
Beef, ravioli, tomato, and meat sauce? You like that? Huh? That gets you so salivating, doesn't it? Nah, none for you, you ravioli-digging whore.
The Gentleman's Guide, released in April, showcased George, Max, and Ian parodying gentlemanly behavior through absurd physical challenges like a backyard obstacle course drenched in slippery soap and fruit projectiles.
How many cookies could a good cook cook if a good cook could cook cookies? I'm done! If a good cook could cook cookies, A good cook could cook as much cookies as a good cook who could cook cookies. That's how you... Stop! If you want to be a gentleman... Let me just finish this.
However, perhaps the most notorious project from this era was Human Cake, completing the grotesque Cake trilogy. In this audacious video, George, Ian, Max, and HowToBasic gathered disgusting ingredients sourced from various popular YouTubers. They collected urine from Joey salads, chewed banana remnants from JonTron, pubic hairs from Jacksepticeye and KSI, toenail clippings from Make Me Bad 35 and Anthony Fantano, and even PewDiePie's ass hair. Adding even more absurdity, they then visited Vsauce, who, appearing as a vagrant, provided saliva along with oddly fascinating facts.
Sure, I got spit facts. Oh, we don't need it's this saliva. Fine. Honestly, it's fine. It's the salivary glands. You get as easily nowadays. Get the fuck back! Back to your corner, just fucking sleep.
Thank you, Michael.
The video would end up culminating in a fake wedding between Max and George, which would then be promptly interrupted by a dramatic objection by Chad, and then ultimately devolve into what can only be described as absolute chaos.
I object.
Shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up.
Unfortunately, all three Cake Trilogy videos would face eventual removal from YouTube due to violating the terms of service. The final official Cancer Crew collaboration was uploaded on October 7th, 2016, titled Deadly Twister 2. The game featured George, Ian, and Max playing a hazardous variation of Twister, where each colored dot triggered a painful or dangerous challenge. Chad presided as the ruthless game master while HowToBasic filmed, and the game ended intensely when HowToBasic unexpectedly unleashed fury by hurling objects dangerously around the room, genuinely upsetting Ian in the process.
Okay. You're done. You're done. He threw something solid on the side of my head, my ears fucking really hurt. Why'd you throw something hard at me? My ear's fucking ringing. I need to go to hospital. Why would you throw something solid, you cockhead? You could have actually killed us. You got into a fucking rage. You got into a rage. That was insane. If you don't want to film for us, you don't have to. We could get someone else, okay? Fuck. Oh, I'm so it's bent. We needed this for another fucking video.
Despite the drama, the group's eventual drift apart was likely unrelated to this video or incident. However, it did mark the natural endpoint of their collaborations together. After 2016, George began to start shifting his focus towards music. Although not yet mainstream, his musical endeavors, particularly as Pink Guy, began gaining serious traction. Songs like Nickelodeon Girls, humorously and presciently lampooning Dan Schneider and the questionable culture surrounding Nickelodeon, became popular despite their controversial nature. You see, George had quietly been working on Pink Season, his ambitious second Pink Guy album. Released on January 4th, 2017, it boasted an extensive 35 tracks, all filled with edgy humor, shocking lyrics, and satirical parodies. Surprisingly successful, the album peaked impressively at number 70 on the Billboard 200 charts. Even mainstream figures like Jimmy Fallon reacted to the album publicly, being amused yet bewildered by tracks like Meme Machine.
This next song is from an artist called Pink Guy. Love the cover, love the name. Maybe I'll love the music. Let's take a listen to Meme Machine.
Meme Machine.
Meme.
Wow.
Give me the memes. I need the memes. Inhale the memes, exhale the memes. Inject the memes into my bloodstream. There are good memes and there are bad memes. Why has God abandoned us?
What? What?
Why has God abandoned us? Oh my goodness.
Wow. Got deep.
That memes that song.
Yeah, but
George's promotion of the album included high-production music videos, notably Shut the Fuck Up, which remains his channel's most viewed upload with almost 100 million views. Notably, 2 songs, Dog Festival Directions and White is Right, were later removed from all major platforms due to their controversial content. One unforgettable highlight from this era was Pimp My Wheelchair, where Frank customized a wheelchair for a friend named Wheels, a black man with cerebral palsy seeking street credibility and some of that pussy.
You need pussy. I need more pussy, man. I want more pussy. I need it. I can't live without it. Like my bottle of liquor right here. I just need pussy to survive, bro. I'm going to college.
Wheels would also go on to become a fan favorite character in the Filthy Frank lore. However, his appearance would just be a one-time thing.
Wheels is an upsitting citizen. Except for one problem. He can't get any pussy. Not with that wheelchair.
You'd think that at this point, there would be no stopping George. Both of his channels were on fire. Not only his skits, but his various series, characters, collaborations, and music projects had all found massive amounts of success, and it seems like with the increased production value of George's content, this would just be the beginning. Well, it kinda was the beginning. Rather, it was more or less the beginning of the end. In September, he published Francis of the Filth, which was a full-fledged, actual legit novel that intricately explored his bizarre characters and universe while combining sci-fi narratives with cryptic and often biblical allusions. But most importantly, it served to put a proper end to the Filthy Frank lore, and give a proper conclusion and send-off to the universe and its characters, tying up all loose ends in the process. Soon after, in that same month, George uploaded the emotional finale of The Filthy Frank Show, another high-quality skit featuring the tragic demise of Frank and promoting the new novel. The YouTube landscape was now heading towards the end of an era that had profoundly impacted the platform's humor and culture. Fans had initially hoped that George might simply just be on hiatus, or taking an extended break. But soon, George himself would confirm bittersweet news and signal a definitive end to everything. Turkey Tom, take it away.
On December 29th, 2017, George finally let it be known to the world that he was officially done with Filthy Frank. The message was brief, posted from the character's own Twitter account, and laid everything out without any frills. There were 2 main reasons he gave for walking away: his declining health and a shift in creative priorities. Years of yelling, screeching, and performing multiple exaggerated character voices had left him with actual throat damage. A cruel irony given how often Frank joked about having throat cancer. On top of that, he was experiencing seizures from a neurological condition he chose not to go into detail about, something that only worsened under the pressure of keeping up with content demands. But beyond the physical issues, George was just over it. He wasn't enjoying the content anymore, and the idea of continuing just to satisfy a fan base that didn't really care about his personal well-being was wearing thin. The truth is, he'd been saying this for a while. It just took until the very end for it to sink in for most of his audience. Some fans refused to accept it until he actually said it outright. And even if none of that had happened, if he was still healthy and interested, it's hard to say how long the Filthy Frank channel would have lasted. YouTube was already shifting gears hard after the 2017 adpocalypse. The type of stuff George was making didn't stand a chance in the new landscape, where anything remotely offensive risked demonetization or outright removal. The channel was always walking on eggshells, and sooner or later, something was going to snap. George likely saw the writing on the wall. Leaving when he did may have been the only healthy way to walk out on his own terms. Despite all of that, the TV Filthy Frank channel has continued to gain subscribers even years after going dormant, now sitting close to 8 million. What's left feels like a digital time capsule, capturing a very specific corner of internet history. But George had already moved on. The chapter was sealed. While saying goodbye to Filthy Frank, George was laying the foundation for his next act, Joji. In 2017, he signed with the music collective and label 88 Rising, a group known for spotlighting Asian artists in the American mainstream. That same year, he began rolling out more serious songs under his real name, stepping away from the meme-heavy Pink Guy material and into a more emotionally grounded space. Tracks like I Don't Want to Waste My Time, Rain on Me, and Will He were released throughout the year via 88 Rising's YouTube channel, promoted lightly through George's socials. The tone was subdued, melodic, and melancholic, completely unlike anything fans had heard from him before. His first live performance as Joji took place on May 18, 2017, for Boiler Room in Los Angeles. That show marked a quiet but meaningful milestone. George wasn't just experimenting anymore. He was stepping fully into his new identity. Over time, he started collaborating more with other artists on 88 Rising. Having that past as a viral internet figure gave him clout and connections. But what helped him stick around was his clear talent and focus. George had always been interested in music, but now he had the chance to take it seriously, and he wasn't wasting the opportunity. That November, he released his first EP as Joji, In Tongues. A deluxe version of it dropped on Valentine's Day in 2018, with a handful of remixes from other artists. Reception was mixed. Some YouTube reviewers, like Brad Taste in Music, didn't hold back in tearing it apart. But fans seemed to resonate with the emotional honesty and minimal production. Joji, for all his past as a walking shitpost, was earnest here, and that mattered more to most than polish or perfection. George would go on Hot Ones for the first time in 2017, talking about his transition between Filthy Frank and Joji while juggling increasingly spicy wings. It was a lighthearted but revealing interview.
So for better or worse, you have one of the more emotionally charged fan bases on the internet. I've heard you speak before about feeling suffocated from time to time in your personal life. When you think about the crazy faces to face or the pranks with, as you put it, the very elaborate fans, is there a story that stands out?
It's important to have a fan base that is that involved in you, and I respect that. Thank you. But yeah, sometimes it gets a little rowdy. In fact, the only time I want to be approached is when I'm with a girl because it looks cool. But then I often get tweets after that saying, "Oh, I saw you, but you were with a girl, so I didn't want to bother you."
And you're like, "Damn, dude,
bother me." Yeah.
A year later, he returned to Hot Ones, this time with fellow 88 Rising artist Rich Brian. That second appearance leaned more into their music careers. The comedy background was left unspoken, and that pretty much said it all. The gradual transformation was done. Joji had arrived. He kept the momentum going throughout 2018 with a stream of new singles. Yeah Right, Can't Get Over You, Test Drive, and the most iconic of the bunch, Slow Dancing in the Dark. When the music video dropped, he used it as a springboard to announce his first full-length studio album, Ballads 1, set for release on October 26, 2018. Compared to the sparse moodiness of In Tongues, Ballads 1 had a bit more variety in sound and structure. Each song had its own flavor. Some were more pop-leaning, others stuck to his lo-fi roots. Reviews were still mixed in places, but this time the projects got a lot more attention. Ballads 1 debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200, and would later go on to be certified platinum. With the album gaining traction, Joji announced his first tour. It kicked off in Europe, and then expanded to the US in early 2019. By this point, Joji was already a fully fleshed out identity. On June 14th, 2019, he dropped Sanctuary, a single with a big cinematic video full of retro sci-fi aesthetics. George played the role of a starship captain drifting through space after defeating his greatest enemy, only to watch a friend lose his mind and become a new one. The visuals, paired with the emotional weight of the song, created an interesting mix of world building and raw vulnerability. The track struck a chord with longtime fans and even Joji's own friends, including Max and Chad, who reacted to the song live on their Cold Ones show. Chad was obviously enjoying the song, but Max looked visibly moved and emotional in that moment. There was a real sense of pride, like watching one of your best friends finally do what he was always meant to do. Then came Joji's Tonight Show performance in March 2020, just weeks before the coronavirus lockdowns began. He performed a new single he had released the month prior, titled Run, which also had its own accompanying music video. And the reception, not just to Joji's Tonight Show performance, but the song and music video itself, was overwhelmingly positive. People were genuinely impressed, not just fans, but even longtime critics like Brad Taste. Even he, as Joji's self-proclaimed harshest critic, praised his stronger vocals, the ambitious production, and the standout guitar solo.
I mean, sure, Slow Dancing in the Dark was really good, and I don't feel like Ballads lived up to that fully, but this seems like just the vocals alone, like I said, He's got some vocal coaching. This dude is actually taking that next step to say, you know what, I'm serious about music. I'm going to take the next step to make sure that I can push myself even further, and it's showing here, and his ambition is glowing. That's all I can say about this. This is very ambitious, and it's very well put together. I'm very happy with this.
For the first time, there seemed to be a wider consensus that Joji was finally finding his sound and maturing as an artist. Unfortunately, as Joji's fame continued to rise, so did scrutiny. In May 2020, during the peak of a worldwide pandemic, and also the peak of hyperactive internet cancel culture, some Twitter users quote-unquote discovered George's past. Clips of Filthy Frank and Pink Guy had begun to resurface throughout places like TikTok and Twitter, and just like that, hashtag Joji is over party started trending. A lot of newer fans were stunned, some were offended, but the outrage never really caught on in a serious way. And that's mainly because George never responded. So within merely days, the wave of criticism just completely faded. That summer, he dropped more singles, Gimme Love and Daylight. Like Sanctuary, both tracks leaned into space-age visuals and themes of distance, loneliness, and emotional drift. These weren't just aesthetic choices, they were clearly building towards something bigger. And that something would be Nectar. Originally slated for July 10th, 2020, Joji's sophomore studio album was pushed back due to production delays forced by the pandemic, and finally released on September 25th. The album featured collabs with names like Diplo, Lil Yachty, Omar Apollo, Benet, and Yves Tumor. Compared to his earlier work, Nectar had a much glossier, more expansive sound. Reviews this time actually leaned to the positive side rather than being mixed, although some people still found fault in the album's inconsistency as a whole. Regardless, the album once again debuted at number 3 on Billboard, matching the commercial performance of Ballads 1. Once performers were given the okay to start returning to live shows, Joji hit the road again. The Nectar tour sold out extremely quickly and spanned well into 2022. But even as that chapter wrapped up, he was already working on the next one. On June 10th, 2022, Joji released Glimpse of Us. This track was special. It didn't just perform well, it absolutely exploded. The track became his biggest hit to date, topping charts across the world and shattering records. Funny enough, it was originally written for Charlie Puth, who turned it down. Maybe that was a blessing in disguise. The song's backstory is heavy. It was penned by songwriter Riley McDonough, inspired by the tragic murder of singer Christina Grimmie, who had been a close friend. The lyrics came from a place of real grief and spiritual searching. When George heard the demo, he made a few changes, and the final version was released not long after, reportedly just weeks before Charlie Puth was planning to circle back to it. The music video, directed by Dan Straight, is the complete opposite of the song's mood. Shot like a camcorder montage of unhinged, barely legal activities, it features anonymous men wreaking havoc, street racing, setting fires, and spiraling out of control. It's gritty, messy, and filmed across several states on an old Sony camcorder, giving it a raw VHS-style feel. The contrast only made the track hit harder. 2 more singles followed, Yukon, Interlude, and Die For You, and both came with videos that built on the introspective, sometimes surreal vibe Joji had honed over the past few years. On November 4th, 2022, Joji dropped his 3rd studio album, Smithereens. The reception was more divisive this time. While many appreciated the sound and direction, others criticized the album for feeling short and undercooked, almost like a collection of demos. Some even speculated that George was rushing out the project to finish his deal with 88 Rising. Whatever the case, Smithereens still performed well commercially, debuting at number 5 on the Billboard 200. Glimpse of Us continued to carry the momentum, and Joji's evolution from YouTube icon to respected artist was basically complete. But if there's one thing to take from this whole journey, it's that George Kusanoki Miller never stayed in one box for long.
Hey guys, it's me again. Not long after Smithereens dropped, Joji went right back to doing what he does best, performing. In 2023, he launched the Oblivion Tour, the first full tour of the Smithereens era. This run featured 3 massive headliners in the US and UK. After that, he would take things across Europe, hitting 6 different countries. Then came the second official leg of the Smithereens Tour, this time called the Pandemonium Tour. This one started in North America, followed by Australia with a brief stop at Max Mofo's wedding, and concluding with a set of 6 shows in Asia. Fun fact, I actually went to one of the LA shows from the North American run of the Pandemonium tour. I had lots of fun, and it was actually a really great experience. Also, my seats were fucking sick. Like, I was hella close. My camera doesn't even do it justice. But unfortunately, the Asia leg of the tour would end up getting cut short. Joji performed just half of his planned shows before canceling the rest due to health concerns. That would mark the early end of the Pandemonium tour, and the official end of his touring activities for the entire year. The only real release tied to 2023 was a 5-year anniversary edition of Ballads 1, which was just a set of recolored vinyls with alternate art and no new tracks included. Which honestly makes sense, as between all the travel, rehearsals, and performances, it would be very difficult to imagine that George would even have the time or space to write or record anything. But regardless of how people feel about Smithereens, the reality is that we're now in 2025 and there still hasn't been any new music. Not even a single. 2 or 3 years might be a normal break between albums for most artists, especially in the mainstream world. But Joji is not most artists. Unfortunately, he would only perform 3 times in all of the next year. That's it. It's a huge drop-off from the previous year, and it left a lot of fans wondering where the hell their favorite artist went and what the hell he had been up to. On one hand, maybe he was just taking a break. But it's also possible that he wasn't focused on touring because he was focused on Plum Corp Records. NB Duckman has a really great video about this topic up on his channel, which greatly assisted me with the research for this video, so you guys can check that out in the description. Plum Corp is a clothing brand and record label owned by Joji. He trademarked it alongside the Filthy Frank show as well as its characters. The official YouTube channel for Plum Corp was created on June 15th, 2022, and it focuses on, you guessed it, absurd comedy sketches. It's not exactly like his old Filthy Frank content, don't get me wrong, but it's still the same insane dark humor, it still shows through. The clothing sold on their site is based on the weird characters and in-jokes from the videos. Not Joji's brand, just Plum Corp stuff. The first Plum Corp video, Bart Simpson 2050, was uploaded on April 3rd, 2023. The next one, Dracula Flow, dropped a few weeks later and starred actor John Davis Walker wearing a vampire costume and a Sharpie-drawn hairline. He dropped some pretty real-ass bars, I'm not gonna lie. That one blew up on TikTok, of course it did.
Shorty chose to be with a demon, sounds like her problem to me. Ha ha, this shit ain't nothing to me, man. My money longer than James Cameron.
Since then, Plum Corp has uploaded more and more insane sketch content, starring totally random people that Joji clearly hired to play these weird characters. Dracula Flow ended up becoming a full 5-part series just because of how popular it got. Wait a minute. And then there's the music. Plum Corp has actually released full-on tracks on streaming services. Unknown artists, loud, chaotic beats, ridiculous lyrics. By now, Plum Corp has released well over 30 tracks across various fake artists. Some of my own personal favorites include Freaky Angelo,
Grab me by the balls.
Big Swimmer,
If you think I'm broken, you must be smoking crack.
Eustace Davenport, and Twin Diesel.
I've been going John Wick. Y'all be getting John Dick.
All just absolute musical geniuses in their own right, truly. Only haters will say it's auto-tuned. Hell, even Antonio fucking Brown somehow got involved with Plum Corp at some point. The CTE GOAT himself. What's wild is that even with the views these videos pulled in, most people still had no idea that Joji was the one behind all of it. Well, that was of course until people would eventually figure that out later on, but that's besides the point. He found a way to return to internet comedy, make it successful, and still keep his music career intact. So, is there any sign that George has been working on serious music since Smithereens? Not really, but it's complicated. More recently, in November of last year, fans noticed that Joji's music was being re-uploaded to his YouTube channel under a different label, The Orchard Enterprises. This would end up leading some people to think that Joji was switching labels in preparation for a new release. But the most likely explanation is that 88 Rising's distribution deal with Warner expired, so their releases got redistributed through Sony's indie arm, The Orchard. If that's the case, Joji probably had nothing to do with this, at least directly. Still, labels don't sign or keep artists who never plan to drop again. So will there be any new Joji music soon? Maybe, but maybe not. Either way, the longer he stays quiet, the more likely it feels like he's quietly building up to something. And honestly, I don't think George ever wanted to give up comedy, even though his heart wasn't really in it anymore. Deep down, he's always had a love for it, but he's also always loved music. The problem was that the Pink Guy and Filthy Frank characters were simply just burning him out. His health wasn't holding up. So he made the smart call to walk away from it all. But that same sense of humor never really left him. Even now, you see it in his live shows. He'll mess around with meme soundboards, he'll freestyle something goofy, or even boot up a Super Smash Bros. Game mid-set.
Hey, I nutted on my own face. It's a freestyle. Oh, don't do me like that. Come on. Hey, yo, 7 3 on 3, let me hear it. Hey, yo! 2 3.
That funny off-the-wall George is still in there. It just took a few years for it to come back in a form that wouldn't literally kill him. So where does that leave us? Joji is probably working on a new album, or something, and he's managed to strike a balance between his serious artist side and his love for comedy. He currently sits at over 18 million monthly listeners on Spotify, placing him comfortably within the platform's top 500 artists in the world. A lot of YouTubers have tried to cross over into music and failed, but Joji didn't. And part of that is because he knew when to stop. It's time to stop. He saw the platform changing and he bailed at the perfect time, right before the adpocalypse and the algorithm shift made YouTube a nightmare for edgy creators. Look at his friends. How To Basics still uploads, but the numbers are way down. Max and Chad began to pivot from their old content and shift focus to their new show, Cold Ones, which is actually doing pretty well. They even came backstage at one of Joji's Smithereen shows. Max also did Pokemon card content for a while, though that seems to have fizzled out recently. And then there's iDubbbz.
Hello everyone.
I was actually planning to make a whole video on him a while back, but I gave the idea to my friend Samuel. It's a good watch, but it's a bit outdated now, so if you don't want to check his video out, ironically enough, both of my collaborators in this video, Nick Nobody and Turkey Tom, both recently made videos on iDubbbz, and they're also both really good, so I suggest you watch those. And after today's video, it definitely shows how differently he and Joji handled the pressures of staying relevant and the internet shifting beneath them. One adapted, the other, not so much. Editing Kusari here. Also, apparently today, as of the day that I'm recording this, and one day before this video is scheduled to go up, apparently iDubbbz's Creator Clash 3 event has been completely cancelled after several controversies. Joji pulled off what most people thought was impossible. He was a YouTuber who successfully became a real artist. And what's even crazier, I'll show friends a Joji song and they'll love it, only to freak out later when they find out that he used to be the guy in the pink suit singing Shut the Fuck Up over a ukulele trap beat, who also made videos with H3 and iDubbbz and Max Mofo. And that's precisely what makes his story so unique. Other creators have also, of course, successfully made the leap to music, don't get me wrong. Quadeca is an absolutely phenomenal recent example, and he's actually one of my favorite artists. In fact, I'd actually argue that he's already putting out music at a higher level of production quality and scope than Joji. But even a die-hard Quadeca fan like me can admit that despite his intricate attention to detail and high-effort production, simply nobody did it like Joji. He was a trailblazer. He had millions of fans across multiple channels, both dead and alive. An incredibly massive audience that was growing at a rapid rate. And he somehow dropped all of it, reinvented himself, and built something bigger in the process. A totally new fan base, but one that also kept a big chunk of the old one. That is rare nowadays. Say what you will about his music or his videos, but you cannot deny that Joji is a creative genius and a legend in the making. His story is not even close to done, and whatever he does next, we're all going to be watching, or I guess now, listening. Thanks so much to Nick Nobody and Turkey Tom for helping me out with this video, and thanks so much to you guys for watching. I've been Kusari, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.